Hello everyone. This is your friend from Naruto Audio Fanfics, and we are back once again with a brand new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was trapped inside a deadly video game world, Naruto x Anko x Fu Part 2. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit the like button, thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing Naruto fanfics like this. So without wasting any more time, let's start today's fanfic. Naruto looked at the man on the ground with no small amount of apprehension in his eyes. The man had a scrawny build, wispy little tufts of hair poking out of his scalp, and horribly ugly facial features. These features were not helped by the large amount of blunt force trauma applied to it. He was also tied up and leaning against one of the large trees that propagated the forest of death. Who is this guy? Naruto asked without tearing his eyes away from him. Anko walked over and grabbed the man by his hair so that Naruto could get a better look at his face. This man, she said almost gleefully. As Kanzaku Kinu. Anko paused to let Naruto speak. What's he doing here? Excellent question. Zaku here. She pulled the hair harder, making him moan in pain. As responsible for 12 accounts of rape and 14 accounts of murder. The 14 murders include the 12 rapes along with the 2 attempted, but not accomplished rapes. Naruto's eyes grew wide with concern. What the? Why's he here? Another excellent question. See, shithead here is going on the chop and block tomorrow. So I pulled some strings in the T&I department to see if I could get him to help with your education. Naruto became apprehensive once more. What education? Field medicine, of course. She responded gleefully. You're going into medical ninjutsu, and that's great. But no amount of medical ninjutsu is going to teach you how to relocate a shoulder or amputate a limb. Naruto was slightly slow to the uptake. How's he going to help me with that? You are just so full of fantastic questions today, aren't you? She then pulled a kunai out of her coat pocket and severed the man's bonding. He slumped forward in a heap and made no attempt to try and flee. Even though he was semi-conscious, he seemed incapable of moving. After releasing him, she grabbed his arm and lifted it behind his back, then jerked it quickly, making an audible popping sound. The man started to struggle fitfully, but was unable to break out of her hold. Naruto looked at the scene in horror. What are you doing? He almost shouted out. I'm going to teach you the most expedient way of relocating a shoulder possible. By relocating a shoulder. No, I refuse. No, Naruto said with great gesticulations. Anko leveled a confused glare. What's your problem? That's just not right. It's immoral. She seemed to get a laugh out of that. Immoral. We're ninja. Immorality is our strong suit. It's still not right to torture a man without any, what was it called? Just cause. It's not right to torture a man without any just cause. Yeah, well, it's not right to rape and murder callously, is it? But this guy doesn't seem to give any. At the last word, she twisted his arm to the side a little bit more, drawing screams and whimpers from the pitiful man. But, kid, she said humorlessly for the first since the day. You can see this as either torturing a helpless man, giving out divine retribution, or just taking advantage of a good opportunity to learn medicine the best way possible. Seeing that Naruto still looked unconvinced, she let the arm drop to the floor only to grab the opposite one. If only there were someone. She twisted the arm to the side, dislocating it like the other one, who knew how to relocate a shoulder. Isn't it just a shame? She twisted the arm the side once more. At this point, the man was frothing at the mouth dull with pain. Naruto looked at the man for an intense while. He still thought it was wrong to torture people for the sake of making them suffer, but then again the man did commit reprehensible and inhumane acts. And it was always far more informative to work on actual people when learning how to heal them. His time in the hospital had taught him that. After a bit more of mental deliberations, he finally said, okay, where do we start? Anko put up a cruel smile. Lesson 1. Joints. Naruto and Hachiman were working diligently on their respective projects. Naruto was attempting to sew a hole on a shirt closed while Hachiman was working on a custom dress for some sort of high school prom. As a rule, custom-made articles of clothing were far more expensive to make and always took much longer. But considering that they were almost always unique and individual, there was a lot of commodity for them. Currently, the sour-faced teen was sewing the shoulders on with a very concentrated look on his face. Luckily for Naruto, Hikigaya had a tailoring teaching level of 3x, so under his tutelage, Naruto was able to pick up the basics of tailoring rather quickly. Unluckily for him, tailoring seemed to have a steep slope when it came to learning curves. It also required a shit ton of patience to make good articles of clothing, something that Naruto didn't have in spades at the moment. That being said, he was able to patch up clothes rather nicely at that point after having several days of practice under his belt, meaning that Hikigaya could work on the things needed working on while Naruto learned and practiced on his own. It was an intense environment, one that didn't exactly give much incentive to create small talk. Even though Naruto considered himself more adept at sewing with a calm hand when he was talking. As they talked, Naruto learned that Hikigaya had a very different perspective of how the world works. It was pessimistic, but still rooted in reality. He even had stories about how his worldview had become the way that it was. Hikigaya was also really good for bouncing ideas off of. Because of his background as a civilian who didn't really want much to do with the shinobi lifestyle, he took most of what Naruto said and asked as normal shinobi things. Things like, how does the stock market work? Or, if your life suddenly turned into a JRPG, what would you spend the most time on? Naruto suddenly winced in pain and drew his hand hastily away from the shirt he was mending. Looking at his finger, he found that he had accidentally pricked it. A quick healing jutsu later and the wound had closed up. Hikigaya glanced at the process with a disinterested eye. I still find it weird that you shinobi can do those kinds of things. He muttered out. Naruto sucked off the blood that had managed to gather on his finger before he closed the puncture. His medical education had been proceeding well. As of yet, he could heal bruises, small cuts, disinfect wounds, and numb pain. Nothing that would make him any force to reckon with in terms of medical superiority, but at least he could get rid of annoying ailments. Like headaches. He had been getting a lot of headaches recently, so healing jutsu was like a godsend to him. You live in Konoha. Don't you see these things regularly? Other than the odd guy jumping on roofs, nope. Well, I guess that we're doing our jobs right then. Naruto concluded. After making sure that there was no more blood on his hand, he went back to work on the shirt. They proceeded like that for a while until Hachiman dusted off the dress that he was working on and stepped back to get a good view of it. From his understanding, the dress was exactly what this chick wanted. So he had every reason to be proud of it. Naruto decided to ask him a question seeing as he was done with the intense concentration. Hey Hachiman. He grunted an affirmative. Can you teach me how to run a business? Hikigaya gave him a queer look. I only know how to run a small tailor shop, that's it. You'd have more luck enrolling in a class in the academy, especially with your shadow clone thing. But I graduated the academy already. The academy is comprised of more things than just a place to teach kids how to kill each other. There are also different adult level classes, like business management, or marketing, or computer science. Computer science. A relatively new field from my understanding. Why do you want to do this anyway? Learn how to run a business. No. Hachiman seemed to be a loss for words. Gesturing wildly to his surroundings, he said, why did you want to buy a small tailor shop that has almost no revenue? Even if you say that you bought it to take up tailoring, I can't dismiss this as just another ninja quirk. I don't know, there was something to learn, so I decided to learn it. But why do you want to learn? So I can become stronger. Why do you want to become stronger? So I can achieve my dream of becoming Hokage. Naruto said resolutely. Naruto, hard work betrays none, but dreams betray many. Working hard alone doesn't assure you that you'll achieve your dreams. Actually, there are more cases where you don't. Even so, working hard and achieving something is some consolation at least. Just remember that. Who said that? Naruto asked. I did. We should probably get back to work. Naruto nodded in agreement. Clang, clang, clang. Naruto lifted the tongs that held the crooked piece of metal up to his eye. He was trying his hardest to make a serviceable kunai, but it very difficult for him to accurately gauge when and where the metal was going to be displaced once he hit the superheated ingot with his hammer. There was also the varying levels of strength to be used for different desired results with shaping the iron in the desired fashion. Naruto lowered the tongs back to the anvil and started to hit away at it once more. This wasn't his first experience with trying to make a kunai either. The crooked piece of metal that Naruto was clanging away at was attempt number 3. That being said, he did learn several valuable blacksmithing methods on the first 2 attempts. One being to be careful where you slam your hammer. He learned this the hard way when he accidentally hit his arm with the hammer and was dispelled. Filling up the forge with clone smoke was hard to explain away to the hulking Higurashi. Another was not to leave it in the furnace for too long, else it would be reduced to a puddle of iron. Clang, clang, clang. Naruto brought the piece of iron up to inspection once more. It was beginning to take the rough form of a throwing knife. He was getting better at least. Hey Naruto, a voice said from behind him. Turning around, he was met with the sight of Tenten Higurashi, the weapons expert from Team Guy. Hey Tenten, what's up? Nothing really. I decided to end my training a bit early today and check up on you in the forge. Thanks I guess. So how does it look? Naruto asked in reference to his kunai. She walked over closer to get a good look at the kunai. After giving a minute of silent appraisal, she said, it needs a bit of work. Hee, you've got that right, I just don't know what I'm doing wrong. Your dad taught me how to shape the metal and all that, but I just can't seem to get it right. She nodded. They had met on his first day in the forge. After the first bit of confusion and introductions, they had hit it off rather well. Unlike the other females in his life, she seemed normal at least on the surface level. Tenten was also pretty good to talk to. To him, she seemed honest, if a little bit blunt, and also had a similar sense of humor. Needless to say, within the first few days of interaction, they had become rather fond of one another. It's easy, you just have to hit it the right way. Tenten said cheerfully. Naruto's sweat dropped. Wow, that's really descriptive of you. I know exactly what to do now. You've been such a great help, he said with large amounts of sarcasm. She giggled a bit. You don't have to be an asshole about it. Here, let me show you how it's done. Tenten then grabbed his hands in hers and tucked him to her torso. She lowered his hands back down to the anvil and peered over his scruffy head of hair to see what she was doing. Raising her hand which supported Naruto's hand which held onto the hammer, she lowered it down on the piece of metal repeatedly. Naruto blushed slightly under her sudden physical contact, but allowed it nonetheless. Getting a good feel for the force required to use on the kunai, he soon started using his own force instead of hers. After a few minutes of this, Tenten was merely guiding Naruto's hands as they hit the kunai. You also have to be careful about how you hold the iron with the tongs. Shaping metal is more than just hitting it right, you have to know at what angle to hit it too. She began twisting and turning the metal and showed him the effects of the hammer hitting it in different places. It was even starting to look like an actual kunai. Hey, this is awesome. Let me try by myself for a bit. Naruto said excitedly. Tenten let go of him and watched as started to hammer the kunai into shape. She winced every so often as he made a mistake, but the piece of metal was undoubtedly becoming a kunai. Once he felt like he hammered it into shape, he brought up the kunai for inspection and dunked it into the heat-treating oil that was on standby. Taking off the heavy apron, he used the inside to wipe the sweat off of his face. It really gathered in large quantities when working in a forge. So what are you going to do to celebrate? Tenten asked. Naruto brought his hands above his head and stretched out his body some. I don't know. I still need to sharpen it and stuff. But you did the hardest part of it. I think that's grounds for a little bit of celebrating. Oh, what were you thinking of for a celebration then? Tenten put a finger to her chin and started to feign deep thinking. I know. Why don't we get some lunch? Naruto nodded at that. Okay. Where do you want to go? There's this really great restaurant just across the street. But I need to get changed first. Her clothes that she had on were her training clothes, which were still covered in a bit of sweat and grass stains. Cool. I should probably get changed too. Ever since his first day when he accidentally soaked his clothes in sweat, he had been bringing over 2 sets of clothes. Tenten walked out of the forge, which was in the very back of the domicile, and into the main house, which took up the middle part of the domicile. The front part of their building was the store that the Higurashi family operated. Naruto walked out after her and into the store bathroom while she took to the upper floor of the house, no doubt to get changed in her room. When they were both ready and smelling slightly less of sweat, blood, and grass, they walked out of the storefront, changing the sign from open to closed. Tenten led him to the restaurant that was, literally, just across the street from the store. It was a sushi place that made extremely good food if Tenten's comments were anything to go by. They sat directly next the conveyor belt that the sushi filed down on. The small plates all had a color that corresponded to their price, and when they would be ready to pay, all the waiter had to do was to count up the total from the plates on the table. The sushi was as good as Tenten had led to believe. Well-cut pieces of choice fish meat in their various forms all slid down the conveyor belt. With Naruto's newfound fascination with blacksmithing, small talk was easy to come up with. They talked about the different materials and what they would best use for weapon-wise. There were also apparently different techniques that one used when working with different types of metals. Iron, for example, was on the softer side of metals, making it easy to shape and mold, but it wouldn't stand up to the abuse of being a sword, so they were best utilized in kunai and shuriken. Steel, however, was harder to shape, but far more resilient, making it the best material for things like swords. There were also different alloys that had varying qualities to them, but Tenten didn't know much about those herself, so she didn't go much into it. A Cloud Jonin opened up the door to the place and sat down opposite them. She was taller than the average female and had long blonde hair that was corded all the way down to her back. This seemed to remind Tenten of something. "So are you going to enter the Chunin exams?" she asked. Naruto swallowed the piece of raw tuna in his mouth before saying, "I think so. My team hasn't really talked about it much. I'm going to show up and hope that they do too." "You sure? I heard that this Chunin exam is going to be harder than the average one." "How do you know that?" "Well, for starters, there are about twice as many foreign shinobi in Konoha at the moment than there has ever been on any other exam." "Really? How do you know?" "Guy told me and the rest of the team." "Anything else?" "Not much, but it's all really foreboding." The Cloud Jonin decided to enter their conversation. "You two shouldn't enter. It's going to be deadlier this year." "Who are you?" Tenten asked, affronted. "Nobody really," she said through a munch of raw fish. "But I do know that this year is going to harder for you adorable little kittens. Seeing kittens going off to the grinder isn't really amusing to me." Just as she finished that statement, another Naruto clone opened the door and spotted the Cloud Jonin immediately. Walking over to her, he asked, "You Yugito ni?" Dumbly, she nodded while looking back and forth between the two Narutos. Once he got confirmation of her identity, he poofed away in a puff of smoke. She gave the Naruto situated opposite her a hard stare. "You know the shadow clone technique." "What's the shadow clone technique?" Tenten asked, just as dumbfounded as Yugito. "Kind of like the regular clone, only solid," Naruto said simplistically. "But more importantly, why would I need to be looking for you?" Naruto asked the now dubbed Yugito. The memories that he received from the clone were still a little bit fuzzy. "I don't know. I was just in the mood for some sushi." The door slammed open and a large, extremely muscular man entered the restaurant. "Yugito!" he screamed in an annoying voice. She winced at the sound of the shrill scream. "What? You can't just wander off on your own." "I didn't. I told you that I was going to go get sushi." He looked like was just about ready to explode. "Then wait for me to respond." "You always take way too long to respond." Naruto and Tenten looked at this conversation go on back and forth between the two with semi-interested eyes. "Sue, the kunai should be ready for sharpening, right?" Tenten nodded, unable to tear her eyes away from the screaming match going on between the two foreign shinobi. "Is this what it looks like when couples fight?" Even over the screaming, the two Cloud Shinobi were somehow capable of hearing that offhand remark. "How do we even look like a couple?" Yugito asked. "I do not start relations with my underlings," the man said. Tenten grinned at their responses. "Okay. Whatever you say. Come on, Naruto, we have to polish your kunai." Perhaps those were poor choice of words on her part, because both of the foreign ninja blanched at her response. When Tenten and Naruto had paid for their meal and left the store, I said, "They just start doing it younger and younger these days, huh?" Afternoon evening. Naruto's, the real Naruto, face was a dull green. Walking back to his house was a chore for him that he found difficult to accomplish in the state of nausea that he was in. Anko is a sadist, he decided finally for himself, no doubt about it now. After learning how to reset jointed bones, she went on to show him how to sew various wounds closed, ending with opening a gash on the man's abdomen. Even if the man was a rapist and a murderer, Naruto took solace in the fact that he didn't get joy from watching him writhe in pain. He finally lost his conscience somewhere around the third lesson, for which Naruto was grateful. He didn't think he would be able to go through with immolating wounds closed when he was looking at the man in the eyes. Naruto finally gave up and hurled chunks in the bushes when she went on to the fourth lesson, which was amputating pieces of the body that had undergone damage too severe to keep a hold of. Throughout all of that, she didn't seem uncomfortable in the slightest, even going so far as to laugh at the more extreme parts of her lesson. Scary indeed. Well, at least he got some very informative training in field medicine. Either way, he was going to need to get new ninja items for the Chunin exams taking place tomorrow, but that would be done in the morning. Not when he could barely walk. Somehow, he finally made to his house, where he plopped back down on his bed and went through his stats again. They read thusly. Base stats. Naruto Uzumaki. Express. 4329 7000 level 6. Chakra. 51. Chakra control. 21. Wisdom. 41. Intelligence. 13. Charisma. 51. Flexibility. 11. Speed. 13. Strength. 16. Endurance. 41. Attribute stats. Ninjutsu. Learning rate 5200ths. Elemental affinities. Wind 4200ths x2. Fire 5200ths by 0.5. Earth 10/200ths. Water 10/200ths. Lightning 0/200ths. Genjutsu. Learning rate 9/200ths. Detection 9/200ths. Dispel 8/200ths. Taijutsu. Learning rate 28/200ths. Pain tolerance 33/200ths. Form 35/200ths. Senjutsu. Not available. Kenjutsu. Learning rate 1/200th. Form 1/200th. Versatility 2/1000ths. Close range weapons. Bojutsu 20/150ths. Throwing weapons. Kunai and Shuriken 80/100ths. Senbon 20/150ths. Jinchuriki Jutsu. Control 60/1000ths. Shape manipulation 60/1000ths. Medical ninjutsu. Learning rate 3200ths. Ability 4400ths may be limited by current chakra control. Miscellaneous. Only stats of note will be shown. Trap laying 30/50ths. Trap detection 30/50ths. Poison resistance 5/50ths. Seduction 35/50ths. Gardening 10/50ths. Tailoring 15/50ths. Forging 15/50ths. Field medicine 35/50ths. Poison identification and synthesizing 15/50ths. Medicinal identification and synthesizing 10/50ths. Teaching 10/50ths. Politics 5/50ths. He hadn't progressed as far or as fast in trap laying and detection as he had in seduction, so it took up more time than he wanted to and he wasn't able to move on to his other desired options like lying or taijutsu. At least his bow staff form and senbon throwing was going good too. Well, even the scroll said that senbon were fairly useless for throwing unless you were accurate enough with them that you could intentionally hit weak spots on the human body. With his bow staff and senbon, he felt like his battle prowess had grown already in leaps and bounds than what it had before. He had also noticed that there weren't any quests available ever since he finished the first slew, and the first random encounter that he had received since a few days ago was finding that Yugito chick and directing eye to her. It was a good thing that the shadow clone that was practicing his cooking was out getting ingredients at the time, else he might have missed it. Speaking of cooking, he got up and walked over to the kitchen, of which could use a proper cleaning, and opened up the recipe guide. The Anarchist's Cookbook. Forging. Kunai. Mastery level 20/50ths. Shuriken. Mastery level 10/50ths. Tailoring. Repair. Mastery level 35/50ths. Basic shirt. Mastery level 5/50ths. Basic pants. Mastery level 5/50ths. Carpentry. You have no skills in carpentry whatsoever. Cooking. Eggs. Mastery level 15/50ths. Toast. Mastery level 33/50ths. Instant ramen. Mastery level 50/50. Mutation gained. Homemade ramen. Mastery level 50/50. Mutation gained. Pork ramen. Mastery level 10/50ths. Beef ramen. Mastery level 10/50ths. Shrimp ramen. Mastery level 10/50ths. Chicken ramen. Mastery level 10/50ths. Vegetarian ramen. Mastery level 10/50ths. Pizza. Mastery level 12/50ths. Rice. Mastery level 35 50ths. Drinks from mix. Mastery level 45 50ths. Painting. You have no skills in painting whatsoever. Sculpting. You have no skills in sculpting whatsoever. Yesterday, he had gotten another mutation from mastering the making of homemade ramen. The only option, however, was getting 5 new recipes that were more specialized than the first one. It wasn't like he was complaining though. More ramen means better ramen. After that, Naruto flopped back down on his bed and did a quick healing jutsu for his growing headache, then tried to go back to sleep. Oh wait, he had to sign himself up for that business class. Whatever, he could do that after he aces the Chunin exams tomorrow. Naruto clutched at his head in pain. That was the first thing that he remembered feeling when he opened his eyes to the new day. Pain. He tried to go through the hand seals to make a mystical palm generate, but his concentration lapsed and he wasn't able to complete it. Naruto went through those efforts several times before it actually paid off. He then brought the hand up to his head as fast as he could and numbed the pain. Ah, Naruto sighed in relief. These headaches were definitely getting worse and worse. Maybe he should cool it with the shadow clones for a bit. It was the Chunin exam day, so he would probably be forgiven if he didn't have any of his clones go through his daily routine for today. Looking over to the clock on his bedside table, he noticed that it wasn't the time that he set it ring off on. No, it was much later. Naruto's eyes grew wide in concern. At that rate, he was going to be late. Very late. Oh shit. Naruto screamed. He got up and threw on his clothes as fast as he could, put a piece of bread in his mouth, and ran out the door as quick as possible. He'd eat the bread when he got there. It was around noon-ish when Naruto took to the rooftops and sped to the academy. His eyes were glued to the ground, looking for any sign of either Sasuke or Sakura. He was so busy doing so that he didn't notice the special Jonin directly in front of him. Oof. Naruto impacted the person with as much momentum that a 13-year-old genin going about 30 miles per hour could. It felt like he ran into a brick wall. What the look where you're going? Mitarashi Anko trailed off as she realized who it was that impacted her. Her face morphed into one of annoyance into one of surprise and joviality. Hey kid, I was looking for you. Fancy meeting you here. Naruto groaned and picked himself up from the ground where he laid upon. Hey Anko-sensei. He replied while groaning. You're really solid, you know that. She grinned dangerously at that remark. I'll try to take that as a compliment, you damn brat. Naruto looked around the rooftop for a second. He'd lost his bread somewhere in between the time of hitting Anko to hitting the ground. Anyway, why did you want to meet me? Anko brought out a package that had been securely inside her trench coat until then. It was a rather unoffending package, wrapped in brown and not in a box. What is it? Naruto asked. I'm going to be late for the Chunin exam. The Chunin exam. Oh, that's probably going to take a bit longer to set up than what the meet-up time said it was going to be. There are a lot of people after all. Naruto groaned. Does this mean that I could have gotten breakfast? I don't care. Now just open the damn thing up. Naruto took the package with great trepidation, then shook it to make sure that nothing was live in there. Never hurt to check with Anko. After deciding that it was probably an actual gift, he tore open the construction paper that constituted its packaging and took out what was inside. It was a black foldable piece of leather that bulged with instruments. After looking up to make sure that it wasn't anything dangerous, even by ninja standards, and getting a nod in return, he unfolded the leather to see several items that he recognized from his crash course in field medicine with Anko. The largest of which was a small hand axe, used to hack off limbs that had to be discarded due to injury. I can use these? Naruto asked in reverence. He had never gotten such a great gift as this from someone before. Anko grinned smugly to herself. Nah, those are for keeps. Consider it a gift for not dying from my training so far. Naruto's eyes widened in disbelief. Really? He asked quietly. Really? 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 Naruto asked excitedly. Really? Really? Anko said in return. She was getting a kick from seeing him so happy from such a simple gesture. He crashed into her torso to give an almost bone-crushing hug to his ever-so-kind instructor. Thanks Anko. He yelled out, although it was stifled somewhat from being directed inwards to her ribcage. She stood there, stock still with arms dangling to her sides uselessly. Anko wasn't very accustomed to getting hugs, so she awkwardly wrapped her arms around her energetic student. Anko definitely did not excel at shows of physical contact, but he didn't seem to mind in the slightest and continued to squeeze her midsection. Naruto. A voice called from down below him. Naruto detached himself from Anko's midsection to look down on the street below. There were the confused faces of Sakura and Sasuke looking back up. Hey guys. Naruto called from above. Thanks again, sensei, he said before jumping off the building to meet up with his teammates. She shook the shocked look off her face before smirking once again. Hee, brat. Sasuke, Sakura, and Naruto all started walking in the direction of the academy. So apparently the exam is going to be delayed because there's so many people. Naruto stated. We know, Dobi. There's too many people for it not to. More importantly, Sakura interjected. Who was that chick that you were hugging? She was my sensei. Naruto exclaimed cheerfully, and she got me this really cool thing. Naruto unfurled the wrapped piece of leather and showed the both of them its contents. A moment of silence passed before Sakura asked, what is it? It's a field medicine kit. Can't you tell? There's the hand axe, the suture kit, the immolating rod, the anti-infection cream. Why do you have it? Sasuke interrupted. Or I guess, why are you so excited to have it? Because it's useful, and I don't know. It's a gift. And this makes you happy enough to hug her? Sakura asked. Well, yeah, it's the coolest gift I've ever gotten. Sakura looked at him with concerned eyes. A field medicine kit is the coolest present that he's ever gotten. Naruto didn't notice her look because something else caught his attention. Hey Fu! He cried out. Sakura looked in the direction that he shouted and was waving towards and saw a green-haired Taki Kunoichi along with her teammates. Before she could inquire as to who they were, Naruto shot off to them to make conversation. Sakura looked at Sasuke, but he seemed to be taking the new development in stride. Walking up to them, she noticed that they seemed to be rather acquainted with one another. They were already talking amiably with one another and Naruto was making great gesticulations, probably to emphasize a point or something. The two teammates of the green-haired girl were joining in on the conversation, but the green-haired girl herself seemed detached from them altogether. Hey Naruto, who are they? Sakura asked as pleasantly as she could. If they were to be competing for something, then it was probably a good idea to get on their good side. These are Takana, Fujitsu, and Fu. Naruto said, gesturing the team from Taki, and they are Sakura-chan and Sasuke-tem. Naruto said, gesturing to his teammates. Dobi. Sasuke muttered to himself. After exchanging pleasantries, they began to talk about the exams. So what do you think the test is going to be about? Sakura asked. From my understanding, Fujitsu said, there are always 3 parts of the exam. The first 2 parts are meant to get rid of a lot of the genin, while the third part is a tournament-style match between all the ones who made it. But the first 2 tests are always up in the air depending on where you're taking the test. My brother took a test in Konoha. Takana said. He told me that the first test was a written one, while the second was some sort of survival exercise. Naruto looked downtrodden at the news. He absolutely hated all written tests. They were his worst area in the academy. Naruto's eyes widened in realization. I forgot my bow staff and Senbon pouch at home. Well, at least the first part is a written, so I'm not at a disadvantage without them. The blonde spawned a clone and instructed it to go home and get the desired items. So how do you guys know each other? Sakura asked. He got us some ramen. Fujitsu said. But that's only because you didn't want to get sushi. Takana said in rebuttal. And that's because sushi tastes like shit. He replied belligerently. It does not taste like shit. Katsudon is what tastes like shit. You must be mentally impaired to think that katsudon tastes bad. Here we go again. Fu muttered. Naruto nervously scratched the back of his head and looked at his teammates. They argue a lot, he explained. Sasuke and Sakura looked at the pair fight with mildly interested eyes before starting to edge away and get to the academy. As she was trying to break up their shouting match over nothing, Fu waved goodbye to Naruto, who returned the gesture. The academy, as it they would have it, was jam-packed beyond capacity. Members of all different nations were merely trying to get a comfortable standing space without getting bumped into by another team. Team 7 managed to shove their up the stairs and into the right set of rooms for when the examinations would take place. They briefly met with other members of other teams, but they had to be separated to make way for the stream of other applicants interested in taking part of the exams. Sasuke, with the aid of his eyes, estimated that there were about 300 people total participating. Once they were sufficiently cramped against the wall, there was a blast of smoke and a group of Konoha Chunin and Jonin appeared, upside down and attached the ceiling. Quiet! The one in charge shouted out. He was a scary-looking man wearing a large black trench coat and sporting many scars all over his face. We will now begin the first stage of the Chunin exams. You will be given numbers that correspond to your designated spot in one of 3 classrooms. Number 1 is. He trailed off as he recounted the numbers of all the 300 or so genin. Naruto filed into the third room along with all the other genin assigned there. He was number 279. All of the numbers were based on last name, so he sat rather close by Sasuke, who got 268. The person sitting to his left was none other than Fu. Naruto gave a slightly nervous wave her way, which was returned. The sound of the scary man shouting in the first room graced his ears, but the walls were too thick, making the noise unintelligible. After a good 30 seconds of nothing but silence, the man poofed his way into the room that they were sitting in. He was grinning cruelly. My name is Morino Ibiki. I hope that you like the person sitting next to you, because you're going to be going through the rest of the exams with him or her. Naruto's eyes widened and looked over to Fu. I am the proctor of the first stage of the exams. The first stage of the exams will be the written stage. There will be no cheating whatsoever. If you are caught cheating 5 times, you will be disqualified. You may work in conjunction with your partner. When I body flicker out of here to give the instructions to the third room, you may begin. You will have 1 hour exactly to complete all questions on the exam. A couple of Chunin entered the room and started handing out pieces of paper face down. You may begin, now. With that, the man poofed away in a plume of smoke and everyone turned over their pieces of paper. It was dead silent. Nobody was talking, even if Ibiki implied that they could. Naruto looked down at his own piece of paper. Even on a cursory glance, Naruto knew that there was no way that he would get any of the answers right. Looking to his left at Fu, he noticed that she was in a very similar predicament. She looked up from her piece of paper and met his gaze. They shared one very long, very tense staring session. Naruto gulped audibly, then went over his questions one more time to make sure that there weren't any questions that he could have gotten right, but came up fruitless. There were 20 questions total, but they all had either impossibly difficult mathematical equations on them to find out the velocity of various ninja weapons, or extremely obscure historic trivia. Who cares who the second wife of the third son of Lord Digimon IV was? There was the sound of intermittent scrambling of pencil on paper, but other than that, total silence. The scratching started to bug Naruto's ears, they were so annoying. Looking over to Fu, he saw that she was staring intently at her paper, as if trying to figure out a question. Naruto started getting really worried. He didn't know any of the answers to the test and it looked like Fu didn't either. She started scratching something out on her paper and showed it to Naruto. Naruto looked over, expecting to find the answer to a problem and was only met with the words. I think we have to cheat. Naruto looked at the words for a few seconds with a confused expression on his face. Grabbing a pencil, he scrawled out some more words beneath hers. But he said that we'd be disqualified. Only after 5 tries. That means that if we get it within the first 4 tries, then they won't do anything about it. That makes sense, I guess. But how are we going to do it? She looked at him with wide, concerned eyes, then shrugged. I've got really good hearing, but no one is talking. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he thought out a way to cheat. God, the noiselessness was deafening. Naruto couldn't think, with the only noise being the silent scratching of pencil on paper. Naruto's eyes lit up. He grabbed a pencil and wrote under his message. I have an idea, but you have to play along. She looked at what he wrote down and nodded. Naruto took a deep breath to calm his nerves and said, Hey Fu, do you know the answer to question 3? Even the pencil stopped scratching away on paper. All eyes were on Naruto and Fu due to the fact that he spoke out loud. None of the proctors said anything, however, and none of them wrote anything on their papers, meaning that speaking out loud was allowed within the rules. Fu started to splutter out words nervously as she noticed that all eyes were on her. Finally mustering up the courage to speak, she said, I don't know. It's kind of hard. Yeah, I know. When would we ever need to know which summoning contract was the 7th ever made? This is pretty stupid. Well, it is a historic piece of knowledge. Naruto eyed the rest of the class. Most of them went back to their papers, but some started to speak in hushed tones as well. It was as if his speaking had validated their reason and ability to speak with each other as well. But it wasn't enough. He had to make sure that everyone knew that it was okay to speak. He had to somehow transition the subject away from the test and onto something of no consequence. So after we ace the exams, do you have any plans? What? Are you doing anything after the exams? Naruto winked at her, trying to get her to play along. No, why? I was wondering if you'd like to go out and get lunch with me. Fu's eyes widened. What? Like a date? Yeah, a date. By now the entire room was at least chatting with each other. All except the villages that were hostile towards one another. But Naruto couldn't hear any of the specifics, only hoping that it somehow had something to do with the exam questions. Why me? Because you're pretty and I like you. Yes. Okay. That's great. Now, Naruto lowered his voice to a whisper, can you hear anything about the questions? Snapping out of a reverie, she nodded and began to circle and write out answers on the questionnaire that she could hear the answers to. Naruto copied down everything that she wrote down, but it was difficult, he guessed, to hear the answers, the short and long answers rather than the multiple choice answers. More than once, a proctor threw a kunai at a desk pair and ordered that they had cheated too often, but this never happened to Naruto and Fu. They were able to get through the hour having written down 15 out of the 20 questions with answers that Fu believed were correct. They high-fived after that. Once exactly 1 hour had passed, Ibiki showed up once again in a puff of smoke. Pencils down, he ordered. There was a united sound of sticks of wood impacting the surface of the desks. Ibiki smirked. You will now answer the secret 21st question. But be wary. If you accept to answer this question and don't get it right, then you'll be disqualified from taking the Chunin exam forever. Cries of indignation rang throughout the room. Ibiki let them wash over him for a good 30 seconds before shouting, shut the up you weaklings. If you don't want to answer the question, that's fine by me. You won't have to risk being a genin forever. But if you do forfeit, then you'll forfeit your partner as well. He went quiet and waited for answers to come by. One by one, people stood up and announced their choice to back out of the exams. Fu glanced to Naruto with a worried expression, but he showed a calm and confident demeanor. She him and stared directly into his eyes. The look told him everything that he needed to know. He merely gave her a thumbs up and a grin. Taking this as a sign to not worry about them failing, she decided to keep quiet and see how it all played out. Is there anybody else? Ibiki asked once the voices quieted down and there was only about half the class left. When he got no words in return, he merely stated, file out to the main room. What about question 21? A random IWA shinobi asked. File out. Ibiki stated far more severely, to the main room. Getting his point, all the shinobi that were left walked off and into the room where they all started out in. There were significantly less people there now. Only about a third made it, including their class. Ibiki, deciding to forego the body flicker, walked up to the front of the room where he stopped to face the crowd of genin. Congratulations, you have all passed the first. A ball of cloth crashed through the window and threw kunai to the two separate corners of the ceiling. In it contained Anko, and the cloth read, entering. Anko Midarashi, proctor of the second exam. No time to quibble or quabble, you're going to be taking the Anko. Ibiki said loudly. What? She hissed. I'm getting in my groove here. You jumped the gun. I haven't even finished explaining the first exam yet. She grinned and looked on at him with a smug expression. Too slow, huh? You should retire, old man. He was about to refute her statement when another genin asked, so what's happening? What about the 21st question? He looked at all of them with disinterested eyes. One of your classes was told that if they sold out the person that they were partnered with, then they would enter the next stage of the exam. They were all disqualified for doing so, however, and there were only 3 teams that made it out of it. Another class was given a packet that told them to read all the instructions carefully before they made a mark on the test. The last thing in the packet was a statement saying that if they made any marks on the packet, then they'd be disqualified. A surprisingly large amount of teams made it through, with 36 not being disqualified. The last class was given an ultimatum for a last answer and was told that if they didn't get the last question right, then they'd be disqualified from being a genin forever. Those that didn't automatically get into the next round. 26 teams made it. But wait, why did you do that? What's the importance of those tests? The same genin asked. The first test was telling you that going back on your teammates is detrimental in the long run. The second was to test your ability to follow simple instructions. The last one was to test your willingness to go on missions of grave importance that you were given limited information on. Everyone present gave various nods or sounds of approval. Now, Anko shouted out to get their attention on her. Now that you've gotten through the first test, I'm going to decrease your numbers by 2/3 in the next one. Everyone, follow me. At the last word, she jumped right back out the shattered window and onto the floor below. Everyone clamored behind her and began jumping out the window to the floor below, creating a funnel point. Naruto sighed into his hand and pinched the bridge of his nose in annoyance. Come on, Fu, he said to the girl that was still by his side. Let's just take the stairs. But she said to follow. And that's just Anko being Anko. It's okay to take the stairs. She seemed doubtful, but followed him nonetheless. The kids filed out of the window of the academy like so many ants down an anthill. To Naruto, it was actually quite the humorous sight seeing the advanced game of follow the leader happen as all the advancing members jump out the academy window at a snail's pace and run after the next kid. Naruto looked dispassionately at the scene in front of his eyes. In the distance, he could see that the line generally made it to training ground 44. The Forest of Death. Might as well get going. Naruto murmured to Fu. Oi, boss. Naruto turned his head to see a clone walking leisurely out of the academy building with his bow staff in one hand and his Senbon needle bag in the other. The clone tossed both items at the original, who dutifully caught them, before fishing out a pamphlet and a book from his pocket and giving them to the original as well. I signed up for a few classes in the academy too while you were around in the first exam. Cool, you can dispel then. The original said while strapping the Senbon bag to his leg right next to his kunai holster. You know a solid clone jutsu? Fu asked. Huh? Naruto asked distractedly while moving in the direction of the Forest of Death. Yeah, the shadow clone technique. It's really cool. They began jumping across the rooftops as they ran to the Forest of Death. Fu wasn't very talkative by nature, so the time passed rather quickly as they ran to the supposed next stage of the exam without any conversation. Naruto was fine with that as he spent the majority of the time running processing the information that the clone had given him when it dispelled. So apparently classes cost a lot of money when you weren't enrolled as a student in a publicly serviced institution. He'd definitely have to make some more job clones if he was going to afford those classes, however they did open up in a month, giving him ample time to make that kind of money. After that, he was going to have to buy the required books and file out the paperwork required to get him into Introduction to Business, Business and World Economics, and Business Theory. All of the business classes were taught by someone who went by Mao Sensei. A weird name even in the ninja world. Before he knew it, Naruto and Fu were at one of the many entrances to the Forest of Death among the milling around genin teams that made it. Naruto craned his neck every which way to get any glimpses of his teammates. This proved to be a fruitless endeavor up until he saw a shock of pink hair stand out at the outskirts of the crowd. There, Naruto pointed out excitedly while grabbing onto Fu's arm and pulling her with him to his female teammate. Hey Sakura-chan, he yelled out. She turned her head to see who was shouting at her before giving a half smile half wave. Naruto pulled up with Fu in tow to find out that Sakura had been in a conversation with Ino and had resumed immediately when they pulled up. Hey Dobi, Sasuke said from off to the side. I'm surprised you made it. Of course I made it. I'm awesome. Fu's awesome too though. Fu clutched onto one arm and looked down with a bashful expression on her face. Naruto looked at this expression of shyness with confused eyes. What's wrong, Fu? You were really awesome. We wouldn't have made it through the exam if it weren't for you. Yes, we would. He wasn't even scoring based on the points. Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean that you didn't do really good. She smiled a little bit, but her demeanor didn't change in the slightest from his comforting words. Sasuke quirked an eyebrow at their behavior. What's up with the bow staff? Huh, the bow staff on your back. Why do you have it? Oh, that. I've been practicing with it. But, why? Because I got a scroll for it and it seemed cool. Sasuke looked like he was going to comment further, but decided not to as it was impossible to argue with Naruto's logic at times. So you're paired up with Fu for this? Naruto nodded. Well, at least you know her. I'm with that guy. Sasuke jerked a thumb in the direction of a nondescript guy talking to his two other teammates. One with red hair and glasses, and another that looked extraordinarily creepy. Yikes. I feel bad for you. Sasuke grunted an affirmative. Yo Naruto. Kiba shouted out as he drew near to the group. By his side was a slightly disgruntled looking sand shinobi wearing what looked like either a black cat suit, or a black bat suit. Either way, he looked silly. What's up Kiba? Naruto said as they slapped hands. Got through the exam. Just barely. The Sunanin said. You were just about to write all over the test when I stopped you. Yeah, well that doesn't matter anymore. Because we don't need to worry about trick questions in this part of the exam. Kiba declared confidently. Konkuro palmed his forehead. You don't know that. That crazy proctor lady hasn't even told us what this part of the exams is. Kiba made wide gesticulations towards the tree line. Oh what? You think that we're going to be taking another written exam then? Konkuro crossed his arms over his chest. No, what I'm saying is that there might be a side to this next exam that isn't immediately apparent. As they continued to bicker back and forth, Shikamaru entered the fray with a tired expression on his face. He was being dragged to the group by an irate red-headed Kumo nin. She dropped him off as soon as she made contact with another of her comrades, the white-haired one that Naruto had found the sensei for. Hey Shikamaru. Still whipped by women as always? Naruto asked. He shrugged and made a noncommittal grunt of affirmation. Might as well be. Is anyone else coming? Shikamaru looked at the sky as he began to think about that question. Choji didn't make it past. Neither did Shino. I think Hinata made it through. Hey. An excited voice interrupted their conversation. Tenten ran up to Naruto with a joyed expression. You made it. I didn't see you in the exam hall. I didn't see you either. As they got caught up in their respective examinations, the partner of Tenten walked up to Fu. So you're partners with Naruto-san? Fujitsu asked. Fu nodded. Yeah, I suppose that you're partners with her. Fu asked, pointing to Tenten. Yeah, have you seen Takana? I could have sworn that she made it through the exams. Unknown to them, a very frightened Takana was following a very frightening individual who had red hair and a sand gourd on his back. He didn't seem in any specific hurry to get to the test, and Takana was very afraid of what he might do to her if she suggested that they speed up their pace. He had already threatened her with death once before and she was sure that he was fully willing and capable of following through with that threat. No, I haven't seen her. I hope that she's alright. On the shack that was connected to the gate to the forest of death, a poof of smoke materialized. In common Anko fashion, she let the smoke disperse to show her in her confident and brusque pose. Alright, you guys. This is the start of the second stage of the exam. There are a total of 65 teams and 130 individuals left. As I said earlier, I'm going to reduce that by 2/3. She fished 3 organisms out of her pocket. Each team will be given either a snake, a toad, or a slug. Anko brandished each of the separate species in her hand. Each and every one of these creatures is extremely venomous. The slugs and toads by touch, and the snake by bite. Your job is to keep one of these creatures and take 2 others of different teams. Then you make it to the center of the forest where there will be a building waiting for you. You must make sure that your animals does not run away. You must make sure that your animals are alive and accounted for at the end of the exam. You must keep your partner alive, as we won't take half of a team. You must make sure that you have at least 1 slug, 1 toad, and 1 snake. If you bring more than one of the species, we don't really care. But if you bring any less, then you won't get in. Are we clear? A hand shot up amongst the crowd of genin. He was a nerdy-looking guy with glasses and a white ponytail going down to mid-back. Excuse me, but how long do we have for this test? She smiled disconcertingly at him. Thanks for asking that. You have a grand total of 7 days, 1 week, to make it to the center. Also, just to make myself clear, killing is frowned down upon, but still allowed. Ah, that reminds me. She fished out an alarmingly large stack of papers from out of her inside pocket. If you wish to continue with this exam, then you will have to sign these papers. They state that it's not our fault if you die. Now, who am I going to get to pass these out? Anko pulled a kunai out of her pocket and began to point at some of the genin down below. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. At the sound of mo, she threw the kunai without warning at Naruto, which sliced his cheek wide open. Ah! Naruto clutched at his bleeding cheek out of reflex as blood poured out of the wound. Getting his wits about him, he pinched the cheek to his shoulder and used his blood-soaked hands to try and create the seals for the mystic palm technique, but his fingers kept on slipping. While he was doing this, Anko's body flickered over to him and tossed the legally binding contracts to the ground as she busied herself licking his cheek wound. Naruto froze in pain, fear, and general disgust as Anko continued to lap up the blood flowing from his cheek. The rest of the genin made a rough circle to watch in stupefaction as Anko drank his blood as ravenously as a vampire. Naruto gained his wits, roughly shoved his teacher away from him, and completed the mystic palm seals. What the Anko? He finally shouted out. Looks like we need to work on your reflexes. She drawled out in an uninterested tone, acting as if there wasn't blood dribbling down her chin. You went way too far. Naruto said as seriously as he could. You seriously went way too far. Anko glanced at her little student. He looked scared out of his wits, but that wasn't the thing that made her pause for a second. No, there was something in his eyes that spoke out to her on a more profound level. He looked almost betrayed by her actions. It wouldn't be the weirdest or most grotesque thing that she's ever done in front of him. Heck, she taught him the proper way to wield a hand axe when amputating a limb, using a living person to do so. Just hand out the flyers. Okay, she said with the same uninterested tone, albeit toned down a little. Naruto wiped his hands on his pants, thoroughly dirtying them with blood, before bending down to pick up the packets on the ground. Without any words, he began passing them out to the other genin. They all resumed what they were doing before, even if they did have slightly wider eyes than before, or spoke in hushed tones. Kiba ran up to Naruto with the rest of the remaining rookie 9 in tow. Dude, what the was that? Do you even know her? It took a few seconds for Naruto to reply. Yeah, I know her. She's been my sensei for the past week. Why would she do that? Ino asked with genuine concern. That's just how Anko is sometimes. Even so, Tenten said. That was way too much. You could report her for doing stuff like that. She usually doesn't go that far. Naruto made to exit the conversation by going and handing out the contracts to the rest of them, but Kiba blocked him angrily and took a hold of half the contracts. Tenten also came up and took a portion of the contracts, prompting the rest of the group to do so as well. That's seriously messed up, man. Kiba continued in a hushed tone. You should report her. I'm not going to do that. And can we just drop it? It's in the rules of being a Jonin teacher that even if the Jonin teacher has weird training rituals, then the student must give their express approval of going through the training. And there may be no instances where the Jonin instructor hurts or injures the genin student for seemingly no reason. Opening up your cheek and drinking your blood is kind of against the rules for Jonin. Naruto gave Kiba a pointed look. You memorized the Jonin instructor rulebook. I skimmed it, but that doesn't matter. She's not allowed to do that stuff to you. Listen, Kiba, she's not actually my Jonin instructor or just a Jonin instructor. Kakashi didn't teach me before, so I asked a couple of other Jonin to teach me. Anko is the only one who accepted. She's the only one who's teaching me and I'm not going to turn her in. Even so, she has to be aware that it's against the rules to do that shit. And I'll talk to her later, I guess. It took up until they finished passing out the papers for Kiba to speak again. Look, man, I'm just trying to look out for you. Thanks. Thanks for looking out for me, but I've got it handled. Kiba didn't look too sure. About 30 minutes later, Naruto and Fu were hopping through the tree line, trying to get as far away from the starting area as possible. In Naruto's hand was a purple snake being held in leather gloves. He had to be extraordinarily careful with the snake seeing as it was just a really venomous snake, and not a summon of any kind. Naruto didn't know what practical applications the gloves had, but it did give him a sense of protection that handling a snake barehanded didn't. Eventually, Fu gave the sign to stop and landed on a tree about midway up. When Naruto was by her side, she said, "We have to have a plan or something." Naruto nodded. "Right. I guess that means that we have to know what we can do." "Okay. You start. I'm good at setting and detecting traps. I know the shadow clone jutsu, the substitution, and the transformation jutsu. Other than the basic 3 jutsu, I know the scale powder jutsu and the water blade jutsu. I haven't heard of those 2 before. The water blade is kind of self-explanatory. The scale powder jutsu includes me exhaling a lot of scale powder, which has the ability to reflect light to high degrees and is also combustible." "Combustible," Naruto said slowly. "Things that are combustible can be lit on fire easily. Although the scale powder is more explosive when there's a spark than anything." Naruto put his hand to his chin and put up his best thinking face. "Okay. Here's how I think we should do it. I use my shadow clones to make a lot of traps all around here. Then once they dispel and we know where the trapped teams are, we go over there, you use your scale powder thing to distract them, and I'll grab their animal. What if their animal is something that we already have? Then we toss it back. No sense in trying to hold to 2 snakes when you only have to hold onto one." "Hee. That's what she said," a voice said from above them. Naruto shrieked and fumbled around with the very venomous snake in his grasp while Fu took out a kunai and placed herself in front of Naruto in basic VIP protection stance. "Oh, cool your panties," the voice said from above them. Anko revealed herself from the leaves and jumped down in front of the 2. "Anko, what are you doing here? Aren't you the proctor?" "Well, duh. What do you think I'm doing? Proctoring. Did we do something wrong?" Naruto asked, still semi-struggling to keep the snake's head under control. "Well, not really, but I do need to talk to you." "Okay." Naruto didn't move from his spot next to Fu. "Alone. Listen, we're in the middle of an exam where people are trying to kill us. How important is it that you need to talk to me alone and leave Fu behind?" Anko very nearly growled in frustration. "Okay, fine. I just came to tell you." Anko trailed off at the end. "Yeah, just that." She trailed off once more. "What? God damn it. I'm not good at all this sentimental stuff. I'm sorry." "Okay." She finished brusquely. "Slicing open your cheek and drinking the blood was a little overboard, I admit. So I graciously apologize." Anko huffed, looked away, and put her arms over her chest. Naruto and Fu shared a look. "It's fine, Anko." Naruto finally got out. Her stance didn't change at all other than one eye glancing over to Naruto. Naruto sighed with a dusting of a smile on his face. "It's fine, Anko. I graciously accept your gracious apology." She grinned despite herself. "Great, so we're all squared away." She turned around and jumped away from the 2. "Your teacher is kind of loopy," Fu commented. "You don't know the half of it." 1 day later. "Come, Samui-chan. Let us show the teams our flames of youth." Rock Lee was just about to jump down from the tree that he and Samui were squatting on and race into the situation unfolding before their eyes, but Samui held him in place from his collar. "First off, don't call me Samui-chan ever again. Second off, we wait to see who's left over, then we engage." The fight that they were watching was kind of strange. There was a Suna genin who had a strange ability to control sand and was making liberal use of it in the fight. Behind him was one slightly moist globule of sand levitating in the air at about head height, along with a dry one, and a very large globule about the size of a person directly behind him. The people that he was fighting seemed rather well suited to each other in terms of combat ability. One tried to distract the enemy using superior speed while the other attempted to capture the Suna genin in a genjutsu. No matter how well they seemed in tune with one another, their efforts were fruitless. The Suna genin didn't seem very affected by the genjutsu, nor did he have any problems keeping track of the fast one. Eventually, as the fight wore on, the Suna genin made use of their blind spots to capture them both simultaneously within his sand. They struggled somewhat and the Suna genin seemed to be very conflicted for a moment before a segment of one of the opposing genin floated off from his covered form. The third small globule joined the other 2 at height level. He. Blood for mother. In a horribly gruesome display, the Suna genin's fist clenched and the 2 opposing genin were completely crushed under the force of the sand. Blood spurted out and soaked the ground before the little psychopath. And now do we engage, Samui-san? Lee asked. Her eyes narrowed coldly. No. Now we flee before he realizes that we've been watching him. Right. One day later, Karui stumbled through the brush yet again and turned around to throw a wild slash at the enemy following her. The blade met nothing but air. Shit, she hissed to herself. More rustling in the underbrush caught her attention. From the depths of the forest, she could make out huge, glowing green eyes staring back at her. A sharp snarling sound broke her out of reverie and she was off like a rocket, one more in the opposite direction of the eyes. Karui wanted to scream. Not out of fear, mind you, but out of frustration and hatred. I knew I shouldn't have gone with that twat's plan. More snarling from directly behind her. Her pace quickened and she was trying with all the mental capacity that she had left to remember where their designated rendezvous point was. He mentioned that he was a shadow user. He might be able to help her out of this mess. She broke through the foliage into the clearing where they designated to meet up at if things went sideways. The snarling was becoming unbearable. There were rustles in the upper parts of the trees and animalistic howling sounds. Shikamaru wasn't there by the tree where he said they should meet up. Shit, she hissed out once more. She drew her sword and stepped into Kumo's kenjutsu stance taught in the academy. Karui tried to pinpoint where the enemy or enemies were, but every time she tried to get a look at a figure in the bushes, rustling or snarling brought her attention to behind her. This continued until she began to nearly hyperventilate from nervousness. All at once, she had enough of the figures, petty mind games. Come out and fight you. The shrubs to her left broke as Shikamaru walked out, carefully balancing a slug and a toad in either hand. Pipe down, will you? The sound of a beast roaring brought her attention to behind her. Get back, she ordered. Shikamaru looked at the sight with a perplexed expression before nodding to himself and walking up the irascible Cloud Genin and tapping her shoulder. Kai. The rustling, the snarling, the growling, the roaring, the howling, the eyes. They all vanished. What? She asked. You were under a genjutsu. Shikamaru explained. Everything made sense now. Nothing actually came at her and tried to engage physical combat. She only perceived sounds and images that looked or seemed threatening. Her temper flared up once more. What the? I thought we had a plan. He leveled an uninterested stare at her. I thought so too, until you went and got yourself trapped in a genjutsu and started blundering through the forest. How did you manage to defeat that team? She asked, noticing the new addition to their animal repertoire. I didn't defeat them. I took the slug while they were too busy laughing their asses off at you stumbling through the forest. They didn't notice me then, but by now, they're probably wise to it. So we should start running. He shrugged. She narrowed her eyes at him. I so wish I had anybody else for a teammate. The feeling is mutual. Meanwhile, Omoi looked at a rather cruel scene. On the ground were two rain shinobi clutching their calves that had been slit open. They weren't able to move, much less walk. By his side, a rather groggy Ino was coming around from the forest floor. Your Kakei Genkei is really scary. He commented. It's not a Kakei Genkei. Why didn't you catch me? I warned you what was going to happen. She asked accusingly. I did catch you, but then I dropped you. She began mumbling to herself. This doesn't even matter. They had a snake too. Should we kill them? What? No. God no. She replied before walking off in the direction of their camp. Come on. We only have one animal left and I'm not going to let Sakura get to the camp before me. But what if they get another rain ninja to patch them up? Then they might try and hunt us down. Then they might try to kill us for retribution. Then I'll have to act like a hero and save you. Then, oh my god, will you shut up? She asked in a tired tone. What's up with you and overthinking things? He piped down, not having an answer for that. A short time later, Neji parried a thrust, blocked an overhead strike, and caught a kick. This fight was child's play. The boy he was fighting jumped back and drew a kunai from his belt. Neji prepared himself for knife fighting by going back into the basic Hyuga gentle fist stance. The mist nin he was fighting was actually pretty good with knife fighting, but he should have started out with it first. Then he might have stood an actual chance. Neji grabbed the boy's wrist, took a hold of the knife with his other hand, and took a hold of it. Then he thrust his palm forward, still holding the handle of the knife, and blocked the tenketsu in his arm. With that arm now paralyzed, Neji was free to use it as leverage and pull him into a stab. The kunai sank into the kid's chest with a squelch and he fell to the ground, dead. Neji looked at the dead kid with no amount of sympathy. The fight going on behind him with his cousin and the other teammate of the Mist Genin was continuing. Hinata isn't as good as he is with the gentle fist stance. He knows it. She knows. Everyone in the clan knows it. That isn't to say that she's not a good fighter, however. She's remarkably talented at the gentle fist. But what really lowers her potential as a shinobi is that she just doesn't have the heart for it. There were several openings in the guy's guard, but she didn't take the opportunities as they were all lethal in nature. Neji nearly sighed in exasperation. He walked over to the fight and slit the shinobi's throat while he was getting his breath. You're too kind-hearted, Hinata. He was trying to kill you. Try to kill him back. She looked at the blood pouring out of the boy's neck and blanched a horrible, pasty white. Neji knelt down and checked his clothing. A neon blue toad hopped out of his sweatshirt and nearly touched Neji. His reflexes saved him when he brought his own leather glove to pluck the toad out of the air. It was a good thing that the gentle fist went through things like clothing, else he might have a big problem with holding onto the venomous animals. Come on. We have to capture 2 others, and waiting a week to do so is unacceptable. Neji said as he hopped to a tree and sped off. Hinata was trembling a little, but was still capable of movement. When they first started out, Neji had given Hinata responsibility over the snake, but she accidentally dropped it within a few hours. Its chakra signature was nearly indistinguishable from the other snakes in the forest, meaning that they had to give up on it. Hinata hopped up and after her retreating teammate and cousin. Random encounter. Don't let Akamaru die. Reward. Vastly increased influence with Kiba and Akamaru. Naruto looked at the small pop-up with wide eyes. That can't be good. Naruto. Fu alighted on the branch opposite him. There's a team nearby. Your friend Kiba is in it and he's having a panic attack. What should we do? With Kiba and Akamaru. Tears burned Kiba's eyes as he continued to try and bandage his dog up. The blood was pouring out in great amounts, more than a small dog like Akamaru should be able to make. His last encounter with another team had ended up with Konkuro knocked out and Akamaru slowly bleeding to death from a wound that stretched from his neck all the way to his thigh. Kiba quickly gave them his slug and they left without any problem at all, leaving Kiba to tend to his dog. Kiba wiped his eyes once more to clear them of the salty water. Shit. Come on, Akamaru. You're going to make it. He said, smiling at his semi-conscious dog whilst his lip was trembling. Akamaru gave him one slow blink and a pained whimper in return. Kiba didn't know what to do. He wasn't done applying the bandages yet and they were already thoroughly saturated with the lifeblood of his dog. He should have paid more attention to his sister when she was telling him how to sew up wounds for dogs and other animals. He had dismissed it as knowledge that he didn't really need. He really needed it. Kiba felt useless as he saw his dog dying in front of his eyes. He grabbed Akamaru's head and looked directly into his eye. You're going to fine, Akamaru. He said with a trembling voice. You're going to be fine, and we're going to kick, and we're going to pass the exam, and we're going to be best buddies forever. Akamaru wasn't capable of producing sounds anymore. Akamaru's panting increased and he blinked slowly once more. Kiba began to break down in tears and wrenching sobs as he saw the life drain from Akamaru's eyes. The blood started to stop coming out of the wound. Kiba. Naruto bounded across the trees and lighted down next to the distraught Inuzuka. Naruto. Kiba got out as he saw Naruto and several clones of himself cut the hastily made bandages from Akamaru's body. What are you doing, Naruto? His limbs felt weak and shaky and hollow. He scrambled up to one of the Narutos and tried to wrench him away from the small pup. Get off my dog! Kiba screamed frantically, not knowing what to do. The Naruto clone shoved Kiba to the ground and merely replied, "We're saving Akamaru right now. Shut up and don't get in our way." Sometimes the distraught needed a kick to the face in order to get them to act reasonably. Why you can do that? Kiba asked with a shaky voice. The Naruto didn't reply as he began to get out his field medic case along with the other Narutos. There were only 3 around Akamaru, any more wouldn't fit. With the bandages now gone, they were free to sew the wound closed. Their mystic palm technique wasn't good enough to where they could heal rends in bodies as large as this one, so they had to use the field medicine training gotten from Anko. All three of them sutured 2 areas in the wound per person, closing it for good. The process of closing the wound took about 20 seconds. The Narutos then got out another implement and fed chakra into it. It began spitting out concentrated flame onto a small metal plate. They began to press the plates onto the small animal, cauterizing the wound. 2 Narutos started the mystic palm technique and brushed it over the wound while the other one checked Akamaru's breathing and heartbeat. How many blood pills did you give him? Hiba fumbled his words for a good 5 seconds before the Naruto slapped him sharply across the cheek to get him out of his stupor. T3. All I had. Naruto fished in his kit for a while before pulling out 1 blood pill. The human body can only take 6 blood pills before it runs the risk of producing cancerous hemoglobin cells. I'm not sure what the number is for animals, but I'm guessing it's less. Naruto popped the pill into his mouth to chew it up and spat it into Akamaru's mouth, then he massaged the dog's throat to get it to swallow the mushy liquid. Shit, one of the clones said. Heartbeat's gone. Get the defibrillator. Out of the sleeve of medical instruments came out a small circular pad with a handle on it. All he had to do was put chakra into it and it would send an electrical pulse into the body, shocking the heart into beating again. He set it to its lowest setting before pressing it to the small dog's chest cavity. Clear. The Narutos withdrew their hands from the dog, allowing the defibrillator Naruto to send the charge into the dog without accidentally shocking the other Narutos dead. One of the other Narutos brought his hand to Akamaru's chest once more. No heartbeat. They did this once more, then twice more, then thrice more before the Naruto checked Akamaru's chest and concluded that it was beating again. The Narutos continued with their mystic palm technique again to run diagnostics and to make sure that Akamaru's body was holding up. After 5 minutes of continued scanning, the Naruto clones poofed away and the original stood up to address Kiba. He's going to be fine. Kiba jumped up and wrapped Naruto in a crushing bear hug. His sobbing broke out again. A 4th Naruto clone got up from scanning Konkoro and gave a thumbs up before dispelling as well. Fu watched the whole thing happen with wide open eyes. You're a medic, Nin. Yeah, kinda, Naruto said while awkwardly patting Kiba on the back. Guess I forgot to mention that, huh? He managed to pry the crying Inuzuka from his torso and lay him down. What Akamaru needs now is rest. He should be up in a few hours, given the blood pill works. Thanks, man. Thanks so much, Kiba said. I don't have any of the testing animals to give you. Naruto stood stock still and looked off in the distance. One of the traps got tripped. Naruto said to Fu. And don't worry about it, man. Comrade's right. The blonde Jinchuriki offered his fist to Kiba. Kiba tentatively tapped the fist with his own. Naruto shot off with Fu after that. I'll make it up somehow, Kiba said to himself, watching Naruto retreat off into the distance. Naruto put his hands on his hips and looked up at the captured game above him. Hello, Naruto-san. The game wiggled in the air at him with a friendly smile on its face. Please don't kill me. Naruto sighed into his hand. Fujitsu would have rubbed the back of his neck in embarrassment if it weren't for the fact that his arms were tied around his body by a length of rope that held him upside down from the tree canopy. God damn it. I cannot believe that this happened again. Fu alighted next the agitated Naruto. Hey Fu. Hey Fujitsu. Naruto walked around the tree and found a thoroughly dizzy Tenten upside down and held tight to the tree trunk by a coil of rope. Hello Naruto. She slurred out, clearly out of her head space from being upside down so long. Naruto walked up the tree to cut Tenten loose while Fu did the same for Fujitsu. Fujitsu merely fell down in a clump on the ground, while Tenten used Naruto as a support, seeing as her body felt alarmingly airy at the moment. This is the 3rd time this has happened. Fu stated in reference to the fact that whenever they got a trap to work on someone, it was always someone Naruto knew. To date, they caught one team of Shikamaru and Karui, one team of Ino and Omoi, and now one team of Tenten and Fujitsu. They also got a random team of a Snow Nin and a Moon Nin, but even after an extensive search, they came up with nothing to show for their work. Fujitsu groaned and got back up to his feet lethargically. At least he got to move around and sway the rope slightly, alleviating the effects of blood rushing to the head somewhat. You could have been gentler, he complained. So what do you guys have? Naruto asked. One toad and two slugs. Fujitsu said. You. Just a snake. Naruto patted a pouch on his hip rather affectionately. It squirmed uncomfortably in return for the gesture. Trade you a slug for a snake. Hee hee. I think I'm going to have turned that down. Fujitsu nodded in acceptance and began to stretch himself out. Separate ways then. Sure. Naruto tentatively let Tenten go so she could stand on her own 2 feet. She was still a little wobbly and red-faced, but was fine for the most part. Naruto and Fu jumped up to the trees and began to hop to their home base. It was a longish run and they had a ways to go. After a while in silence, Naruto said, "You're not really talkative, are you?" She blushed slightly out of embarrassment. "Not really, I guess. So what's your home like?" "I like it. Actually, taking the exams in this forest kind of reminds me of it." "Does Taki have a lot of forests?" "I live outside of Taki. There are a lot of forests there." "You live outside your village. Isn't that kind of dangerous?" "Not really. There isn't a lot of big game predators in the forests around Taki." "Does anyone else live with you?" She shook her head. "Doesn't it get kind of lonely?" "A little bit, but I have my books. And whenever I'm needed on a mission, they send a falcon my way." "So why do you live in the forests anyways?" She shrugged. "I don't know. It was the best for everyone." "The best for everyone? What does that mean?" "It means that everyone's happier that way." "Happier? Why would they be happier to not see you?" "You're awesome." She blushed for a different reason this time. "Thanks," she said, smiling at him. "But you wouldn't be able to understand it. I'm not that stupid, you know." "Why wouldn't I be able to understand?" She giggled a little bit at his response. "It's not that you wouldn't understand because you're stupid. You wouldn't understand because I'm in a unique situation, I guess. The thing that sucks about being different is that you aren't able to get a lot of empathy." "Oh god, why are you so vague with everything?" Naruto jabbed playfully. "'Cause I have to be. Hee hee. You're kinda." Naruto stopped on a branch without any warning. Fu jumped ahead a few lengths before noticing Naruto wasn't with her anymore. Naruto's eyes were racing back and forth listlessly when Fu came to a stop beside him. "Is something wrong? Did another trap get pulled?" "Oh shit," Naruto said quietly. "My teammate's about to die." Sasuke was having problems. These problems mostly manifested in that exceedingly strange and creepy Kusa-nin that was attacking him. His teammate was useless. Nowhere to be seen. Nowhere to help. Heck, Sasuke didn't even know if he was alive at the moment. The Uchiha couldn't bring himself to care, however. He had been kind of a douche the past 2 days. Sasuke ducked under a swipe that would have taken his head and tried to shove a kunai into the thing he was fighting. He used the pronoun thing to describe what he was facing. After all, there was no way that it could be human. As a rule, the top-tier shinobi almost always had some weird quirk or fighting style that got them on the top. However, being able to grow your neck out to monstrous lengths and try to bite your opponent just wasn't human. His thrust missed by a mile as the Kusa-nin bent its abdomen as an odd angle to the side. It used the momentum it gained by doing so to roundhouse kick Sasuke from the back and send him flying. He impacted the trunk of a mighty oak with a sickening thud, spitting out bile and other fluids from his mouth as he did. Sasuke fell slowly to the ground, unable to move because of the lack of air in his lungs. The ground was coming up fast to meet him. He closed his eyes and did the best he could to brace for impact. MMMMPH. Sasuke's world halted and shifted laterally from his perspective as a pink blur caught him midair. Said pink blur landed heavily on a nearby branch with a heavy grunt. "I've got you, Sasuke," Sakura said as she gingerly let him down. As soon as Sasuke's feet touched the branch, his knees crumpled under him and was forced into squatting position from his exhaustion and injuries. "Sakura, what are you doing here? It's too dangerous," he tried to warn half-heartedly, eyelids fluttering open and closed. "Don't worry. You're safe. We're going to protect you," Sakura replied with a determined look on her face. Another person landed on a branch a couple of trees to their right. She had dusty blonde hair done up in 4 pigtails and was wearing some sort of purple dress smock. In her hands was a long bow staff-looking thing. "You got him?" she asked, not tearing her eyes from the upper foliage. Sakura grabbed Sasuke's left arm and hoisted him up so she could support his body. "Yeah," she grunted out. Cuckoo. A voice from directly behind her. She whirled around and was put face to face to a man with a melting face who was detaching himself from the tree trunk her branch connected to. I didn't know that Sasuke-kun had such loyal teammates, he said, almost beside himself in amusement. Get out of the way, Sakura. Sasuke grunted out, trying to separate from the Haruno. He's way too strong. He's a freak. I'm not abandoning you. A severe grunting came from their right. Not wishing to chance glancing away from the monster in front of them, they didn't see Tamari unfold her fan and unleash a concentrated blast of wind at said monster. Orochimaru was unable to move away in time to avoid getting hit square in the chest by the blast and get thrown away at the forestry. Come on, Sasuke. Sakura nearly screamed as she tried to move with the stoic Uchiha. He jumped away with her, but refused to avert his eyes from the direction in which Orochimaru was thrown to. Sasuke saw the body impact a tree far away with his Sharingan. The body turned a dark brown and melted against the tree it impacted. He's not gone. Sasuke rasped out. What? Tamari looked behind her shoulder to confirm what Sasuke said. Orochimaru melted from the tree ahead of her and thrust his palm forward. Snakes grew rapidly from his sleeves and tackled Tamari against a tree with a gasp of air. The snakes oriented themselves to where they were, hugging the girl to the tree with a tight grip. She was unable to move her hands to make any hand seals. You know, for Itachi's brother, I was expecting something a bit more. Orochimaru said casually. Sakura. Sasuke rasped out once more. Get out of here. You can escape. She shook her head and drew a kunai from her thigh. Holding the kunai at a cross hold, she tried to put up her most intimidating face in her repertoire of facial expressions, but didn't get much success in intimidating the snake man. Wow, even in the face of death, your friend doesn't leave your side. How gallant. Orochimaru's tongue lengthened and shot forward to firmly grab Sakura's kunai hand. Her eyes barely had time to widen in surprise before Orochimaru whipped her away from Sasuke. He stumbled to the floor, now lacking support. Sakura. He screamed at the direction where Sakura was flung to. You're 13, so I'm not exactly expecting you to go toe-to-toe with me. But come on, Itachi was an Anbu at your age. Sasuke ground his teeth in frustration. Shut your goddamn mouth. Hit a nerve then. Don't worry, you'll be useful. If not to your teammates, then at least to me. Orochimaru's neck grew as long as his tongue did previously and snapped towards Sasuke's neck. Too tired to resist, Orochimaru's mouth clamped down on the last Uchiha's neck with him barely being able to react in time. Sasuke screamed in pain as he felt white-hot lead flood his system. Orochimaru smirked despite having his mouth full of neck, but it was cut short as his head was severed mid-neck. Both parts of the body crumpled to the floor and fell off the tree. Fu, who had done the cutting, rushed over to Sasuke's side to make sure he was all right. After a few thrashing fits, Sasuke's eyes closed fitfully and froth emerged from his lips. Are you all right? She asked, testing to ascertain whether or not he was conscious. Naruto landed next to her with two shadow clones in tow. They each held on to Sakura and Tamari respectively. The original bent down at Sasuke's side and started the mystic palm for general diagnosis. I don't think we should stay here. Fu whispered to Naruto. Why not? You killed that guy, right? There wasn't any blood. Naruto got up and created another clone to carry the unconscious Uchiha. Then yeah, we should probably leave. All five of them shot off into the direction of Naruto's and Fu's home base. So what did that snake guy do to your teammate? Fu asked. No frigging idea. Whatever that bite did, it created a sealing array that's messing up Sasuke's chakra. I don't know how to treat it. Will he be okay? Naruto adopted a dismal countenance. I don't know. He said. He'll be okay. Fu stated with confidence. What makes you say that? Because he has you looking after him. She said, smiling at him. Naruto smiled back. Thanks, but I don't think scatter. A large boa constrictor flew out of the foliage and nearly hit the group head on, but missed by only a few feet as the five members immediately ran in different directions. Kukuku. What have we here? A Jinchuriki. A slimy voice said from somewhere in their general vicinity. It was impossible to hear where it was coming from. Fu very nearly slipped on the branch she landed on. How does he know? She asked herself. He shouldn't know. What have you done with Sasuke-tem? Naruto screamed out at the top of his lungs from somewhere in the distance. Fu was trying desperately to get away from the scene and hopefully recombine with the clones at home base. They were just clones. It only took one hit and the cargo that they were holding onto would plummet to their death. Fu stopped on a branch and pressed her back to its trunk. This is what most shinobi tactical experts would call a mission gone foobar. Up. Beyond. All. Repair. They were fighting a man who had just knocked out 3 people rather effortlessly by himself, or so she assumed based on the outcome of his fight with Naruto's teammates. They had to protect 3 people, one dying from a strange seal that the man had given him. And they didn't know about any of his fighting prowess other than the fact that he can stretch his neck out, give others some sort of strange seal, and somehow avoid death. Not only that, but he had information on her status as Jinchuriki. Fu ground her teeth in frustration. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She liked Naruto. Probably not in a romantic way, but she did genuinely enjoy talking to him, and interacting with him, and being with him. He made her feel normal. He made her feel like she wasn't a freak, and now that was all over, because now he knows that she's a Jinchuriki. They had made several plans to follow and phrases meant to enact them over their days together, well more like she forced them down his throat and tested him on them. It made sense to her to be safe rather than sorry. Scatter is the keyword used when they had precious cargo that needed to be saved, and thus they run in different directions when ambushed to keep the chances of the people going after the precious cargo down to a minimum. Once they were sure that they weren't being followed, they meet up back at the home base. That's the plan anyway. The leaves rustled cacophonously in the trees around her. A big wind jutsu must have been used on Naruto. She shook her head. Fu could keep with the plan and go to home base to make sure that his teammates arrive there safely, or she could save her partner against an obviously more powerful foe. Chances are he knows that she's a Jinchuriki. He might not want her help. It might be better to wait at the base for his teammates. She took a deep breath to calm her nerves. Well, sometimes it's okay to be selfish every now and again and deviate from the plan. Naruto grit his teeth together and threw the senbon in his hands at the snake person. They all impacted with muted thuds in his torso and thighs. Laughter spluttered from the man's face. These are poisoned, right? What is this poison? Well, it's plant-based. Flowering plant, Narcissus. That's only toxic when ingested. Orochimaru said condescendingly. Who taught you about poisons? Naruto spat a wad of blood to clear his mouth. Self-taught. Orochimaru tutted out his disapproval. You know, you should really get a teacher for these things. You might hurt yourself otherwise. Naruto glared at the man. His face was jubilant, joyous, happy beyond measure. He was having fun fighting Naruto. I do have a teacher for poisons, we just haven't gotten to that point yet. You smell lightly of dango, snakes, and my cursed seal. I was just thinking that you got the cursed seal scent from your friend just now, but now I'm thinking that you've gotten it from somewhere else. I also only know one person who smells of dango and snakes, so such a point that it would rub off on someone else. So Anko-chan took an apprentice then? Naruto growled at the man. The sealing array that appeared on Sasuke's neck did seem very familiar to the one on Anko, but this creep just confirmed it. Naruto was facing off against one of the most powerful people in the world. Orochimaru of the Sannin. I'm not her apprentice. You're not her lover then. Under any normal circumstances, Naruto would have blushed and spluttered and in the end have said no. There weren't normal circumstances. Naruto's glare intensified. No, she's just my teacher. She took a genin team. No, she's a special jonin. They don't let special jonins take teams. So what are you then? Her student. Students who spend enough time with their teachers that their scent rubs off on them are called apprentices. Naruto was getting impatient. He drew his bow staff from his back once more. I don't actually cared what I'm called, she's just kind of nitpicky about it. Now are we going to fight, or talk? Orochimaru chuckled as the senbon in his body drew out like they were being pushed. You're brave, I'll give you that. Not exactly smart. Orochimaru looked straight up to the sky and opened his mouth. He then regurgitated what looked like the handle of a sword. The snake man grabbed it and drew it out of his gullet with a flourish. Using his other hand, he made a come hither motion. Naruto ran at the man with the bow staff held diagonally to his torso. When he was near enough, Naruto used the end pointing downward to thrust forward and hopefully catch him unawares. Orochimaru batted the bow staff to the side and caught Naruto with the flat of the blade across his face. Naruto pulled back and held his smarting cheek with his hand. God, that hurt. Orochimaru looked at the Jinchuriki with an expecting look on his face. Naruto glared at him and ran forward, this time swinging the bow staff horizontally. Orochimaru directed the blow to go above his head, but Naruto was expecting him to do that. Instead of being unbalanced, Naruto used the momentum to spin himself around and swing downwards onto his head. Orochimaru put his blade diagonally to the blow, so the bow staff hit the ground with a thud. Naruto dug inwards and used it as a pull to swing his leg forward and kick him directly in the abdomen. Orochimaru stumbled backwards off the branch and onto the ground below. Naruto didn't leave his guard down for a second. There was no way that one of the strongest ninjas in existence would be defeated by a fall. No matter how large of a fall. Naruto backed all the way up on the branch until his back was touching the trunk. He kept his wits about him and glanced every which way so as to not fall prey to an ambush. A great gale of wind blew through the branches and leaves in its way to hit Naruto. To dodge this, he jumped to the right and landed on another branch just in time to see the branch he was on just earlier get torn apart under the force of the wind. Another one approached him from his left, forcing him to make the same maneuver. This happened twice more before Naruto found himself in a slightly bare copse of gigantic trees. Naruto stopped to catch his breath and look around him to see if there were any signs of wide-scale wind attacks. Great, splintering cracks emanated from Naruto's left. Turning around, he caught sight of a huge snake barreling towards him. As it moved and swerved through the forestry, it occasionally shoved aside a tree or slithered directly through thick branches. Naruto froze. He had never seen anything so huge and menacing before in his entire life. It was almost unreal how large it was. Actually, scratch that, it was unreal how large it was. And yet, Naruto was forced to acknowledge its existence by mere fact that it was splintering branches and cracking mighty oaks. Naruto. A piercing scream resounded throughout the forest, somehow draining out the sound of the snake carving a path to him. After he heard that scream, something happened. He didn't know what, because he wasn't extremely cognizant of it and it also happened so fast. But what he did know was that when he opened his eyes and looked up, he saw that his hands were dug into beige-colored scales that belonged to the snake that was barreling towards him. He could feel himself straining against the force. It pushed his muscles beyond capacity of what they should be able to logically do, but he did it anyway. Kukukuku. To Jinchuriki. Now this is a surprise. The detached voice of Orochimaru said from atop the serpent. He could hear grunting coming from his side. Looking over, he was met with a huge shock. Fu was opposite of him, doing her best to hold the snake away from them as well. However, her appearance had changed. The orange of her eyes had taken over them completely, making the sclera an orange as well as her pupils and irises. Her skin tone was darker as well, not drastically so, but definitely to the point where it was apparent. Fu. Naruto. They were suddenly clutching nothing as the giant snake that Orochimaru summoned poofed out of existence. Orochimaru faced them from one of the few remaining branches in the copse of trees that they were in. You'll definitely make a suitable rival for Sasuke. Naruto growled at the snake man. It was deep and menacing and did belong to any vocal range that a human could recreate. Fu made a vibrating sound from the back of her throat. It turned into a high-frequency whine that would have burst the eardrums of any normal human. Luckily for them, Jinchuriki weren't normal humans. Orochimaru did a few seals. All 10 of his fingers lit up in a purple flame. Never did I ever think that I would face off against 2 Jinchuriki at once. Naruto crouched low to the ground and held his hands out in front of him. The bow staff on his back forgotten. Fu made a few hand seals and water burst into being onto her hands into the shapes of swords. All 3 of them stood there quietly until a leaf floated leisurely from the canopy in the middle between them. The moment it passed below the branch that Naruto and Fu were standing on, they leapt forward at the snake man. Sakura sat up in pain. She clutched her head almost immediately. It felt like a drummer was violently pounding her head from the inside. Sakura groaned out in pain softly. Almost as soon as she made that grunt of pain, a Naruto rushed to her side and started up the mystic palm technique. The pain began to fade in small increments. Naruto? She asked. The last thing she could remember was being violently flung away from Sasuke. After that, there was a sharp sensation of pain and her world went black. Don't worry. We saved you, he said quietly. You hit your head on something when that snake guy flung you away. You might have a concussion. Indeed, her world felt fuzzy and unfocused. Sasuke, she whispered. Don't worry, he's alive. We have your teammate too. Sakura nodded and took a look around her surroundings. It was dark, for one. The only light being a hole directly in front of her that filtered in some sunlight. She ran her hand on the surface of where she was sitting. It was smooth and hard but didn't have the frigidness that stone had, marking it as wood. Where are we? The Pinkett asked. A bout of coughing directed her attention to the left of her. Tamari was struggling to regain her breath while sitting propped up against the room's wall. Naruto made over to check on her, but she waved him off. We we're in a tree hollow, she said with a raspy voice. Don't talk, Naruto ordered. The Sunanin waved him off once more, but didn't speak up. Sakura looked around the space again to see if there was any sign of Sasuke. Spotting a shock of black hair and a grimacing face, she tried to get up and check on him, but Naruto forced her down. Don't worry, he's fine for now. You have to rest. She hung her head down and leaned back against the wall. How did you find us? She whispered. Mine and Fu's plan was to make a lot of traps and get the animals from the teams we trap. One of the clones setting up a trap saw Sasuke's fight and dispelled to tell me. How long has it been? Naruto seemed conflicted for a moment. About an hour, I guess. It's kind of hard to tell time here, but Fu and the original should definitely be back here by now. The original? I'm just a clone. The other two dispelled a while ago to alert the original how it's going, but he and Fu aren't back yet. Sasuke started to yell half-heartedly in his sleep and thrash around. The clone swore and got up to check on him. Is Sasuke okay? She asked. Naruto took a while to answer. I don't know. That freak did something to him and now there's this weird seal on his neck messing up his chakra system. Unless he gets a sealing expert soon, Naruto trailed off. Sakura nodded. They passed time like that for a while. Naruto trying to keep Sasuke calm and not dead, Tamari trying not to take in large breaths and upset her sore lungs, and Sakura keeping her eyes closed and not in the sunlight. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Sakura thought to herself. There were a couple of knocks at the opening of the tree. One large one followed by a pause and two soft ones. Naruto started at first, but soon relaxed. Anko. An ungainly figure stepped into view and was silhouetted against the light. Sakura soon figured out that the ungainliness came from the fact that it was carrying a body on its back. Hey kid, it said. The voice matched the scary proctor lady and Naruto's different sensei, Anko. The clone walked up to Anko urgently and gingerly took the body from off her back. Naruto laid her down and started the mystic palm for diagnostics. Sakura couldn't tell from where she was, but the body definitely wasn't the original's. Christ. The clone said, stupefied by what it was seeing. Did he put this weird seal on her too? Anko shook her head. You're a clone, right? Then you'll know what happened eventually. What happened to Fu and the original? Anko took a deep breath and leaned against the tree's inner wall. Only Fu was fighting Orochimaru when I showed up. He did something to her seal and vanished when I confronted him. Seeing as this is a unique situation we're in, I decided it was probably okay to show some instructor bias and get her back to your base. How did you know where our base was? I followed you through scent. Then you can find the original. She shook her head. The scent was gone from the place. He probably got taken out by a wind jutsu. Then, am I dead? So long as the original is alive, the clones will continue to be powered until they run out of chakra or the caster is dead. Are you okay? Yeah. Why do you ask? Even from her point of view, Sakura could tell that Anko was acting abnormally. She was speaking in clipped tones and said everything with a pensive countenance. You're not acting like you normally do. Anko realized her mistake and smiled all too quickly while putting her hand to her neck in an embarrassed manner. I'm fine, I really am. She glanced to the direction of where Sasuke was laying. So how's the Uchiha doing? He's not dead. There's that at least. You don't know the half of it. The mortality rate of those with the curse seal is 9 in 10. Upon seeing the look of horror on Naruto's face, she quickly reiterated, "But don't worry, if he's made it this far then he'll pull through." Anko walked inside to get a better sense of the place and nearly tripped on a body. "Who's this?" "Him. He's Sasuke's teammate. I found him on the forest floor. He's in a coma, but I don't know why or for how long he's going to be in it." "Who else is here?" Naruto gestured to Sakura and Temari. "Sakura and Temari. They tried to help Sasuke before me." She nodded to herself as if she was confirming something. "Are you okay here?" The clone nodded. "Okay, good, because I need to head out and warn the Hokage." "Stay safe." Yeah. Anko stepped out of the hole in the tree and hopped away. The clone sighed. "I hope the original comes back soon." 8 hours later, Naruto, the original, blearily opened his eyes to the world. They looked around for a second, trying to comprehend what they were looking at. Soon, the blurs of light refocused into refined dots of sunlight shining through rustling leaves. The birds were chirping. The trees swayed gently in the breeze. Naruto caught a glimpse of small bunnies running through the brush with nary a care in the world. Despite his calm and peaceful surroundings, he felt like shit. No, that was an understatement. He felt like shit that had been steamrolled into asphalt, spewed up with chain wheels, and picked at by dung beetles. If there was a word to describe that exact feeling, he would be feeling it now. From his position on his back, Naruto pulled his arms up and summoned the energy and willpower to put his hands into seals and create the mystic palm technique. Naruto's hands fell on his chest with an imperceptible oomph. The only thing he focused on was manipulating his internal chakra to stimulate the hit cells to help to heal the major bruising on his chest and torso. Once that was done to a suitable degree, he moved on to his arms and finally his legs. Naruto got up with a little bit of difficulty. His aches and pains might have been diminished, but he was still exhausted. A grumbling sound was heard from his gastrointestinal system. He was also hungry. The Jinchuriki looked around him to see if he could get his bearings while taking out a ration pack that Fu had packed and opening it. The last thing he remembered was getting grabbed in the gut by Orochimaru with those purple flammy things on his fingers. After that, he succumbed to unconsciousness. Naruto's eyes widened. "Fu," he whispered out to himself. Naruto ran to the tree nearest him and climbed all the way up to its very tip to get a lookout. He passed branches that had been broken along the way to the top. He didn't really know what to do with that information. Once he reached the top, he tried to spy anything that might denote where he was. But there was only a sea of treetops stretched out before him. Naruto grumbled worriedly. Last he remembered, Fu was still fighting that guy and needed help. If he could have sank to his knees out of a sense of helplessness, he would have. Being at the exact tip of a large tree hampered his ability to do so, however. Okay. Think. I can do this. I can find Fu and save her from that guy. I just need to find her first. Damn it. I should have asked Anko about what she knows about tracking. Trying to find Fu here would be like finding a needle in a haystack. Naruto hugged the twig that was the top of the tree and sighed out of frustration. Listlessly, Naruto tapped the pouch which held onto the venomous snake he was holding onto. Not getting any response, Naruto unzipped it and pulled out what was inside. The snake's spine was broken in many places. It didn't take a medic nin in training to realize that the snake was undeniably dead. Disgusted and frustrated, Naruto threw the snake off to crash into the canopy on its way down. Naruto rezipped the bag, not knowing what else he could do in this situation. But his hand brushed against something square and solid on his right thigh. Naruto's eyes widened in realization. The book. Of course. I'm so stupid. I've probably racked up so many points by now. The Jinchuriki sank down the tree until he was sitting on a branch that could hold his weight. Opening the book up, he clicked through the achievements that flashed by without any care as to what they might be or what they might do. Then he rapidly tapped all the experience box windows that popped up, telling him all that he had done to get them, and finished by impatiently looking at his level. Level 8. That means 1 merit point. Yes. Naruto flipped to the merit point section, hoping that the skill he was looking for was unlocked. He spied the box he was looking for, a light gray against a sea of dark gray. Sense of the Ninken. You gain the sensory equivalent of the ninja dog. A nose that is capable of smelling things so accurately to the point where you could track them. ears that can hear twice as far as normal humans, and taste that is slightly more enhanced. Requires 1 merit point. Prerequisites: large influence with at least one Ninken-based clan member. Naruto immediately tapped the button, spending his 1 merit point on the skill. Other than a tingling in his nose and a high-pitched whine, Naruto didn't feel any different for the few seconds that those went on. Immediately, Naruto was pulled into a new world of senses. As he breathed, he could tell the faint subtleties that the world was comprised of. The scent of berries mixed in with wild animal that had climbed exactly where he was sitting minutes earlier. He could hear the sound of faint tussling from animals he could only guess were yards below on the ground. Now that Naruto could feel all the things that he couldn't earlier, he almost couldn't believe that he had went on happy with senses as dull as before. Naruto clambered up into standing position. Now all he had to do was run around and get Fu's scent and follow her to the base. Oh wait, what does she smell like? Naruto heard a scream from somewhere behind. He wasn't used at all to his newfound senses, so he couldn't perceive the distance at all. Random encounter. Save Karen. Reward: merit unlocked. Sensory ninjutsu, +1/5 medical ninjutsu form. What's sensory ninjutsu? Karen Uzumaki scrambled away from the bear behind her. A root caught hold of her ankle, and as she tried to pull it forward, she heard a snapping sound emanate from behind her. Karen took in a sharp intake of breath as she fell forward with a gasp. She tried to crawl forward, but her broken ankle prohibited that. Air refused to come into her lungs. Shock prevented her diaphragm from flexing. Karen propped herself onto her back and was met face to snout with the giant, 2-story tall bear in front of her. She wanted to scream, but she didn't have the air in her lungs to do so. Its great jaws opened and a caustic-smelling breath emanated from its inner gullet. The massive chest cavity extended and wind pulled her hair forward with the air that was being drawn into the bear's gullet. It looked like it was going to roar, but was cut short when a blonde male fell from the canopy and whipped it on the top of its head with a bow staff. The force of the hit made the head fall forward to the ground and impact with a muted thud. The bear growled and tried to reach out and hit the male, but was smacked across the face more times than it could count in the space of 10 seconds. Eventually, the bear drew backward and thrashed out blindly. Naruto took advantage of this and ran through its legs, throwing Senbon at the tendons that bulged out of its legs all the way. He never would have been able to accurately hit the tendons on a human target, but these were much larger and visible. The beast roared again and fell backwards. It scrambled back to its feet and ran away from the blonde, limping all the way. Naruto turned to the fallen girl to make sure she was all right. You okay? Why yeah. I think so, she said absent-mindedly. Karen tried to get up, but her broken ankle prevented her from doing so. She seemed almost confused by the sudden pain in her ankle. The pain started out slow, but built in intensity to the point where she had to lay back down and quietly moan in pain. Ooh. Ooh, damn it. This really hurts, she said through clenched teeth. This really hurts. Naruto knelt down by her leg and started up the mystic palm technique. His hands hovered gently over the wound, only analyzing it for now. Damn it. Naruto mumbled to himself. What's wrong? Karen asked with her eyelids screwed shut. Oh, nothing. Naruto ripped a few strands of fabric from his shirt and tied them together into a bundle. Say ah, Naruto ordered calmly. Karen only had the mental faculties to do the barest things that humans are capable of doing under high-stress situations, taking orders without question so long as it didn't aggravate her wound. Naruto's hands resumed their hovering over her ankle once the bundle of fabric was in her mouth. War vu gooing. What are you doing? This is going to hurt. Naruto warned before taking a sudden hold of her foot and twisting it back into place. Karen's eyes widened and then screwed shut once more as she silently screamed through the bundle of fabric she was clenching onto with her teeth. Naruto began the mystic palm once more and tried to soothe the blaring nerves in her ankle. Tears stung her eyes and the screams became less enthused as the pain decreased. Once it was down to a manageable level, she practically melted back to the forest floor, exhausted beyond belief. Naruto half frowned at the girl in front of him. He grabbed a hold of her torso and dragged her into a sitting position at a nearby tree. The bundle of fabric that she was holding onto loosely with her jaw was hanging limply from her lips. Naruto pinched the end of it and threw it away into the growth. Are you okay? Naruto asked again. Any other injuries? Karen shook her head tiredly. Who are you? Why are you helping me? I'm Naruto Uzumaki and I'm helping you because 1. It's the right thing to do, and 2. I was hoping that you could tell me if you've seen my partner. She shook her head. I haven't seen anyone other than you ever since the test commenced. Naruto sighed in disappointment. Never mind then. Wait, you're a Jinchuriki, right? Naruto nearly threw his hands up in the air in surprise and indignation. Does everyone and their dog know that I'm a Jinchuriki? She chuckled airlessly from that. No, I'm a censor. Your chakra is really warm, by the way, but there's a dark, malignant chakra in your gut. Sounds about right. Wait, you can sense where Jinchuriki are. Then you can tell me where my partner is. Is your partner a Jinchuriki too? Yeah, okay. Hold on then. She brought both her hands together in a seal unfamiliar to Naruto and began to channel her chakra. After a few seconds of deliberations, she finally said, there are 2 more Jinchuriki taking the test. One is about 2 kilometers to the right of here and the other is about half a kilometer straight ahead. Which one is my partner? She shrugged. The one to the left is in the same general vicinity as Jonin level chakra signatures, so I guess that one's already finished. Your teammate should be the one straight ahead. She pointed in the vague direction of where Fu and the rest of the gang were. Great. Do you know if she's in trouble or anything? It's not moving. So she's either resting or unconscious. Thank you so much, but I need to run and help her out. Do you need help getting in a tree or something? She waved him off. Nah, it's fine. That bear killed my teammate, so I'll probably get picked up by the proctors soon. Plus, I just really need to close my eyes. For a few, Karen's head tilted to the side and her breathing normalized. She was dead asleep. Naruto wanted to move her to a safer position, but time was of the essence. Fu might be in trouble and he could be the only person that could save her. Naruto took off in the position that Karen pointed towards. Now that I have a better nose, all I need to do is get somewhere around where Fu is and I'll get her scent, hopefully. I still don't know how this whole tracking through scent thing works. Nevertheless, he was a man on a mission and nothing would stop him from helping his partner. What do you mean? Ambush? Kuretsuchi asked caustically. We have all 3 animals. We can head to the tower now. Dosu Kinyuta's one showing eye lazily directed itself to face her. I mean that I have a mission to carry out and to do that, I need to draw the Uchiha away from the tree. He said derisively. Pray tell, what is this mission? It sounds stupid as. We can leave. Dosu turned away from her. I'm going to fulfill my mission to my master. You can or cannot come along with me. I don't really care. He walked away, ending the conversation. Kuretsuchi huffed and started to walk brusquely up to him and look at the tree which caught his eye. If I'm going to advance, I need you alive. Now how are we going to do this, dumbass? First we wait for my other teammates. Kin and Zaku. Actually, I believe that your friend Akatsuchi was paired with Zaku. That's good at least. What about the other one? Some no-name medic nin from Konoha. Kuretsuchi remained silent for a while. If shit goes sideways, I just want to remind you that this was all your idea. Noted.